Hey there, listener. Corey Andrew Powell here, and I'm excited to share that Motivational Mondays is now sponsored by BetterHelp. Feeling stressed or anxious? Well, BetterHelp brings you online therapy that's convenient and affordable. NSLS members get 50% off your first month of BetterHelp when you sign up at betterhelp.com/NSLS or click the link in the show notes. Start your journey to better mental health today. Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew Powell, and this is Motivational Mondays, the podcast that brings you inspiring stories and conversations with leaders and innovators around the world. So today, I'm really excited and thrilled to have Marti Fischer with us. She's a career coach, educator, and author of the brand new book, Make Your Internship Count, Find, Launch, and Embrace Your Career. Now, I'm so excited because that's something that I'm very passionate about, and I have my own personal story with internships and the difference they can make in your life. So I've been looking forward to this conversation. Marti's book is a practical guide that helps students and interns navigate the very daunting transition from academia to the professional world, providing readers with the tools they need to not only survive, but thrive in their internships and beyond. Marti, welcome to Motivational Mondays.
Thank you. Happy Monday. And I'm thrilled to be here, Corey.
Oh, thank you. I'm thrilled you're here as well. And as I mentioned, this is passionate to me because now working in this academic space that I've been now for like 5 or 6 years with young people, college age students of all ages, really, very often the interns don't know what to do once they get into the internship that they've actually been trying to get. They don't know how to be assertive. They don't know maybe how much is too assertive when you want to maybe do actual things versus just make copies and coffee, So I think this is such a great survival guide. So thank you, first of all, for writing it. That's my first thing. And second, I want to ask you a question. So I want to know what inspired you to actually write the book, and was it based on your own experiences, or what was the motivation?
The motivation for this book is really interesting because it actually came from one of my kids who was in an internship program. And at the end of the internship, she had everyone over to our house, all the interns, sort of to celebrate an end to the internship experience, talk a little bit about what they learned, what they did. And as we were going through the conversation, and it was just over a dinner, it was very casual, my daughter happened to mention that she was writing thank you notes to all of the people that she had worked with in that particular organization, starting with her supervisor and then the colleagues and the people that she had met. And one of the other interns looked at her and said, "Thank you notes? They should be thanking us for being interns." And I looked at my husband and he looked at me and I thought, aha, there's a book here. Because there are norms in the workplace. A career is a career. It's your life's work. And it starts from the second that you are thinking about your first summer job anywhere, or any kind of work that you do from being a teenager all the way through a career experience. And everything you do and everything you build is iterative. And so I thought, you know what? There might be other people out here that could use a bit of a step-by-step roadmap to help them navigate the world of work. It's fundamentally different than the world of being a student.
That is so true. And I want to just hold the book up here. Maybe you might have a glare on it from my spotlight. But first of all, thank you for sending me a copy and also for signing it. I feel very special.
My pleasure. Yes. You can sell it on eBay for, I'm sure, millions of dollars now.
I'll put that towards my retirement investments. Absolutely. But, it was special to receive it because, as I mentioned, I love that you're doing this because there's always a stigma attached to a couple things, temp workers and internships. And I can remember being like a teenager, getting my first job and working for the state with my mom, for example. And you'd hear people say things like, "Oh, well, just give it to the intern," or he's just a temp," or, this sort of language that swirled around minimizing and almost in some ways dehumanizing the role of interns and sometimes temp workers. So I love that you write this book not just for the students, but it's also, as you say, for the parents and potential employers. So why was it important to also make sure they were included in that conversation?
Because the world of work is holistic. The world of work is larger than the employee. It's larger than the employer. We all have to succeed and thrive in this ecosystem of work. And I will say that I have gotten really good feedback from employers who have bought this for their internship cohorts all over the globe to help them understand what the expectations of employers are, and also for the employers to understand where the interns are coming from. So we can all meet each other where we are and understand where the value is in the relationship. To your point about what could be conceived as the dehumanization of the intern and an internship or temp work, there is, I believe, opportunities everywhere. And for your experience, if it's go make copies, it's, well, could you tell me a little bit more about what I am copying? Could you explain it in terms of what the goals of the organization are? I think oftentimes we miss these micro opportunities to ask questions, to connect with the bigger why of the function or the task, which may seem menial in and of itself, but in reality is connected to productivity and to achieving a business goal. So I think that's one of the hugest opportunities in being an intern, is that you have a boundless field to ask questions. And you actually have an enormous opportunity to move through an organization, because as an intern, everyone wants to help you. And so everyone's willing to share what they do. There's no competition. There's no politics. It's just goodwill. And so interns can really leverage that and meet as many people as they can in that particular organization, so they can, number one, become part of their professional network for later, but number two, really start to understand how the intern themselves lives and creates value in this work environment.
Yes, absolutely. And I think to piggyback off of that too, I had a guest who mentioned the internship situation in which a student may be an intern and become resentful because they're not necessarily being utilized. And he used the making coffee example. So initially, yes, you might be upset. And he said, and eventually it's going to be time for you to speak up. But in the meantime, when they send you to make coffee, instead of griping, make the best damn coffee. Like, go above and beyond with that coffee order, because even sometimes you don't know if even you're being tested with the menial tasks, just to see how you really perform before someone gives you more responsibility. So it's a balance of not getting caught and being angry about not initially being utilized to your fullest. Sometimes it takes a moment.
I'm going to yes and that in a big way. There is a whole section in the book that is called What to Do If. And here are some of these scenarios. What to do if my supervisor cancels meetings? What to do if there isn't enough work to do? What to do if my day is spent running around doing errands? What to do if I don't like the other interns? What to do if I love the company but not the department where I'm working? Whole scenarios and lots of different answers for that. But I do want to piggyback on the coffee example. It is the best example. I love the coffee example, and I'll tell you why. Have you ever met somebody who, when they ask you for a cup of coffee, or could you just run out to Starbucks, that's a need that they really, really have. And that gives the person delivering the coffee tremendous power. You hold a tray of coffee in your hand, and you have the opportunity to say, since I have you, would you mind if I asked you one question? Before you relinquish that coffee, this is your moment to capture. And the more curiosity that you can come forward with, and the more interest you can show in the work that they're doing, that is what creates relationships. And relationships create networks, and networks are 80% of the reason why people get their next job.
That is, that blows my mind. I love that you turn this into almost like a bit of a workbook, if you will. It's like a workshop that you can sort of go through, like a checklist, and you really help young people navigate that. Because I remember in my internship experience in college, the one that really was more monumental for me career-wise, I was a little older than the other students, so I was in a different place. I was assertive. I could go into someone's office and say, hey, I would like to XYZ. But a lot of young people, they haven't developed that muscle yet. And I think that is why a book like this is important, because I don't know if they know how to actually be assertive in those situations, because it's a very new realm and it can be very intimidating as well.
It can be, but I want to give you a real life example. And I'll back up first and say, for anyone who's interested in the book is designed to be about you. It's not pages and pages and pages of words. It's pages and pages and pages of activities and scenarios and worksheets and things that you can do, thought starter prompts. So you can really start to understand and connect your life's experience with exactly how you will create value in a workplace, so you can find the right spot for yourself. So for anyone looking to buy the book, it's really going to be your journey. That's how I set it up. But to your earlier point of asking questions, it's a very interesting experience that I had earlier in the summer. I was at a very large company with their internship cohort, and we had a whole discussion about asking questions. And most of that cohort, who are very accomplished young people, said, we don't feel like we can ask questions. And it's not because our employers and supervisors aren't interested or aren't curious. We just personally don't feel comfortable. And I said, okay, so let's flip the scenario. Pretend that you are the intern supervisor. If your intern never comes to you with a question, what do you think? You might think they're not interested in the work. You might think they're bored. You might think they're checked out. You might think they're arrogant. But you certainly aren't going to think that they're curious and engaged and wanting to learn more.
Right.
And so it is the responsibility of the intern to ask questions. There are never enough questions to ask because you're in the perfect spot. You're not expected to be an expert in the field. You're coming out of school. You have valuable information, you have incredible experience, but it may not be related to that particular function. And so the more questions you ask, the more interested you sound, and the more top of mind you will become when there is an open position in that organization.
Yes, and that's an important thing to remember. The internship itself, 9 times out of 10, the kids who are there, the people who are there, they're there because maybe that particular company or that area, that industry is of interest of them. And it's for the long-term goal, hopefully, to get a job. And I think that part is lost. I think sometimes the internship itself is just looked at as a checklist for graduating. So,
well, it's also a really valuable tool to find out what you don't want to do. Right?
Yeah.
Because here's the reality. Young people who are in school, they're successful, they've worked hard, but they are also very influenced by the adults around them. So for instance, if you have parents or friends of friends who are in a particular industry and they love their work, well, they're going to speak very highly of it. It might not be something you're particularly interested in, but hey, they spoke so highly of it, let me give it a go. And I go and I get my internship in that field, maybe not that company, but in that particular field. And I decide, you know what? This is not landing for me at all. It's really, really good to understand that and get that learning so you can have a body of knowledge and a body of experience to take with you for future interviews in areas in which you might be interested.
And what are your thoughts on almost like the reciprocal of when you mentioned, hey, you might be at an internship where the things you actually know and the value that you bring are really sort of misaligned with whatever that company's tasks and mission might be. And that's fine because then you have to ask the questions as you mentioned. But on the reciprocal, like I said, I think what is a missed opportunity is very often interns don't realize they actually have skills that are transferable. We often all do that where we don't know. Well, you know what? I organized a neighborhood lemonade stand when I was a kid that raised money that went to a homeless shelter. Like it's okay to kind of tap into that and remind, hey, I have some organizations, I have some community organization skill. I can do that because you're recalling your own experiences. So how much of that can play into a successful internship as well?
I'm so glad you brought that up because it's everything. It's you. It's your body of work up to that point. Your hobbies inform your choices about where you're going to work and how you approach work and how you think. Let me give you an example. People who love video games, you should talk about that. Why? Because people who are gamers are really adept at complex problem solving in the moment, adaptability, flexibility, the ability to collaborate depending on the game that you're playing. Sometimes you're in a collaborative setting where you have to create alliances. Very, very good at critical thought. Conversely, let's say you had a job at an ice cream shop or at CVS. Well, that's a function that puts you in front of the public. That's the toughest audience there is, dealing with the customer. There is no organization, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit, that doesn't have customers, and everyone wants to keep their customer happy. So if you have customer-facing experience, talk about that. Talk about your stories. Talk about what you learned. You are the body of that learning. And for the first time, and I do want to make sure that I bring this up, is that this group of people in the next 4 or 5 years are going to be coming into a workplace where there are 4 generations working at the same time. It's going to taper off in 4 or 5 years, but think about the vastness of knowledge, of experience, of the way we think about work. And think about when you're a student, you come as a 100% digital native. You are very adept at technology. You can use a lot of what you know to help educate others who may not be quite so adept, who may solve problems in a different way. So there is a lot that we can all learn together when we have an open mind and when we're curious about what someone else knows or where they might be struggling and where our experience can help. I think the issue a lot of times with interns is they think their experience doesn't matter. Your experience is everything. It's everything, and it's important. And everything connects in your entire world. So think about what you can extract from that experience. And I do want to bring up 6 particular traits that employers hire for, because when you're thinking about this podcast and you're thinking about your own experience, try to categorize the work that you've done, the experiences that you've had, the hobbies that you enjoy, in terms of how can you be teachable. Teachability is an enormously important element for employers. They look for it when they hire. Adaptability. Are you adaptable? Are you flexible? Collaboration. What are your examples of collaborative projects? Could be at school, could be out in the world, it could be on behalf of the community. What are your problem-solving skills? What are your stories there? Humility. How do you show that you are humble and in support and in service? And then finally, leadership. Leadership is not for the CEOs of the world. Leadership is for everybody. And so if you can think about how your experiences, hobbies, and past work align with those 6 areas and tell those stories, it's really powerful.
That is such good advice because, like, we don't really realize the value that we bring. because we haven't really been able to put it down concisely. So I think even with that, it might be a good step for young people to maybe, talk to maybe a resume writer and sit down with them if they don't know how to write it themselves. And I get the problem might be they're having a hard time with putting that into language, right? Or making it sound more, I guess, professional, if you will, those experiences. So that might be, I think, the problem, the communicating of those skills.
Well, there is, in the whole first section of the book is basically about getting ready for an internship, deciding what type of internship you want, learning how to network, developing a resume, figuring out your value proposition, which is exactly what we talked about with those 6 skills, that creates value in the workplace. Developing a value proposition, there's tons of prompts and questions and thought starters for you to figure out that valuable information. How to write a resume, what's important in the resume, how to interview, what questions to ask in an interview, what happens if you get offered a job and you don't want it. That does happen.
Yeah.
Right? How do you say no with grace so that you can keep those people in your network? Really important. A lot of language in the book.
Yeah.
Because language really matters. And that really folds into the impression that you make and the impression that you leave, because that is your legacy once you leave that internship.
And I know what's so important about what you just said too is you don't really realize when you are in one situation, especially in a city like New York, for example, where I did a lot of my time and hanging out and working and everything over years, like 20 years, people end up at different companies. And you may go interview at a place where the person you interned for is now at that other place. And just the whole idea about not burning bridges and knowing how to maintain those relationships. So important that you stress that, because you only have one time to make an impression. Very often you don't get to do it again. And people will remember bad stuff like 20 years later. They'll be like, oh, is that? They'll be looking at you through the window going, no, not him.
First impressions, last impressions, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And you brought up New York. I'm also in New York. Here's the reality. There are no big cities. Everything is small because you're working in an industry. Your industry is small. Finance is small. Media is small. Once you're in it for 20 or 30 years, you'll realize how small it is.
Yeah.
So that is why networking is so incredibly important. And all of those people that you intersect with, connect with them all on LinkedIn, have conversations with them, give them updates. They want to know. They want to be part of your journey. Who doesn't want to be part of a success story of a young person? Everybody. It's what anybody who's been in business for any amount of time, that is one of those amazing opportunities to pay it forward. And everybody wants to do it. So it's really for the intern. And there's a piece in the book about networking and how you spreadsheet networking so you can keep in touch and you can remember what you've done and who you need to be in contact with. But also not being afraid to make an ask. If you would like someone to help you, they want to help you. And the more specific you can be with the ask that you make, the more likely it is that they'll be able to fulfill that ask. Or say, absolutely not, it's just not something that I know. However, I know someone else and I'm going to connect you with them and they will be able to help you or set you off in the right direction. So don't be afraid. People want direction. And so questions like, well, I just want to pick your brain. Statements like that, no. Nobody wants their brain picked. People really want to have a conversation. I want to hear about your journey. I want to hear about your aha moment of why you decided this was your path. I'm going to tell you about myself and let's see where that synergy lies, if at all. And if there is synergy, then let's move forward as a relationship. But statements like, I want to pick your brain, ooh, that's a little tough.
Sounds like a horror film, actually.
It does, right?
now that you put it in that perspective, I'm thinking it doesn't even look good when I even
There's
envision.
No executive out there that wants their brain picked.
Yeah, I gotcha.
No.
But I say often to young people when I speak to them and share my experience, because before I went to college, I was in New York, just sort of a struggling artist, and I was doing um, reception work or assisting work while I could go on auditions and stuff. It was like the whole life of the actor and performer. And I landed at this agency, an ad agency that I had never heard of in my life. And they offered me a full-time gig and said, we'll let you go on your auditions, but we just need you to be an assistant. You can leave and make your auditions your lunch period. I thought, okay, great. And I go to a friend, and I go, have you ever heard of this place called Young and Rubicam?
Are you kidding? I started in advertising. They're enormous.
I had no idea. And my friend says, have you ever heard of God?
Right.
And I was like, wait, what? And the minute I realized where I landed, I began to go around and just ask, what do you guys do? And, I'm in New York City being a comedian and actor, and I began to befriend the copywriters and all the creatives who I worked for. And to your point, a lot of them had that mentee mentor vibe. They wanted someone to sort of share their energy and their journey with and maybe mentor. And that's where I found my first mentors that led me on my path to becoming a copywriter by just, to your point, hey, can I talk to you about what it is you do? I have a funny idea. What do you think of this? I mean, they taught me Photoshop after hours, and they sat down and shared creative briefs with me that I had never seen a creative brief before. It's just, it makes all the difference in the world to express interest and tell people what your dream might be or what your plans might be. It can go a long way.
A very long way, because the most important thing, if the people watching this podcast take nothing away other than what I'm about to say, it will be worth it. Everyone's favorite topic of conversation is themselves. And when you ask someone else about their journey, the world is your oyster. To your point, you get creative brief. You get taught Photoshop. You get brought into the fold. You are the bestie they never had.
Changed my life. Yeah, it literally changed my life.
And what an amazing thing from all sides of the relationship for you. It launched your career. Here you sit today. And for them, they feel like I have something of value that I can share and pay it forward.
Yes.
And so opening the door by asking people about themselves is just, you have thrown open a world of information, of experience, of learning new things, learning new technology. And to your point about mentors, many internship programs now do have a formal mentor program. And I think it is one of the absolutely most critical parts of a mentorship, of an internship. If there is not a formal mentor program, if you have an internship, try to seek out people who will be your mentor, who you can go to and ask questions, who you can learn from. It's really critical, because that mentor-mentee relationship, and again, you're going to be coming into the workforce with lots of information to share. You can pay some of your experience forward as well. And sometimes with this, it may have happened with you, it may not have happened with you, but thinking about, it's a whole chapter on this in the book, thinking about your goal for your internship. What do you want to learn? It could be public speaking. It's everybody's biggest fear. Could be a public speaking skills. It could be more collaborative skills. It could be more leadership skills. But what are the skills you want to build that you could put on your resume for that next job? And that, again, much like making a specific ask to someone in your network, that kind of inclusion helps people to shape the conversations that they have with you and to really see your progress against a goal during the time that you're there. It's very gratifying, both for you as the intern and also for your mentor or employer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting too, how it also ties to what we were kind of briefly talking about when it comes to connections and not burning bridges, and how small environments can be and industries can be. What's funny about the Young and Rubicam experience was, in that world, within 5 minutes, the entire creative team that you knew, they all no longer work there. And they're at like 10 other agencies across New York City. And now you know people at 10 other ad agencies or whatever industry it is, because you've maintained those positive relationships, and you had already planted those seeds. So when you have to now reach out to them, they know that you mean business. Like you have found them again, you're reaching out to them again, you have the same interest, and now you have those professional connections. So this is just such good stuff. And I have a couple quick questions for you as we end our time here. But one is, are there any specific challenges you see now that a lot of internship opportunities have become hybrid or remote versus in person? Like, are there any obstacles there that interns might need to address and overcome?
I wouldn't necessarily call it an obstacle because it is the way we work now, right? But here's the thing. If you have the opportunity to be in person at all in an internship, take it. There is incredible value, even if it's just to do the kickoff and the wrap up. But there's incredible value in being in person, in collaborating with people in the moment, communicating with people as you're walking down the hall. You never know who you're going to ride the elevator with. You could be with the CEO of the company. You just never know. But in a hybrid role, what I will say is that when you are remote, to do a couple of things. Number one, please be early for all your meetings. When you get on Zoom, you don't want to be the last person to get on the Zoom call. Try to be early. Ask a question. Very important to read the Zoom room. So you may want to align yourself with one person on the meeting, for instance, if you're doing that. You may have to schedule more frequent check-ins with your supervisor so you can stay on task and with the other interns. But it's an opportunity to take some initiative if you have other interns in your cohort, and let's say you're responsible for an intern project. This gives you the ability to build that leadership characteristic that we talked about by being the person to organize the meetings, keep the workflow going, make sure the projects are getting done. So you can really start to use a hybrid environment to build on those 6 organizational and characteristic skills that employers do hire for. But in a hybrid world, over communication is key. And if you don't understand something, to reach out immediately, because it can compound very quickly when you're remote, and because you don't have maybe the access that you would have just walking down the hall.
Right. And popping into someone's office and hey,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So you do have to do a little bit more planning that way. And if there's anything that's unclear, absolutely reach out first thing.
Well, what I like about that too is it makes me even shift my mindset to, as you mentioned, not look at them as obstacles, but we just operate differently. But the pillars under which we must operate, or by which we must operate, they have not changed. It's just the mechanisms, right? And how
we're on a screen versus in person.
right, exactly.
That's all.
And I feel personally attacked about being late to the Zoom call, just so you know. But I'm working on it.
I'm not going to ding you on that.
Thank you. I have my moments. Well, that brings me to my last question, which is many times the difficult one to ask people. I had a hard time with it. And now there's been legislation put in place, so it's maybe not asked as much anymore, but compensation for internships.
Yep.
And that's one of the topics you cover as well. So, how do we address that? Because now interns are actually saying, hey, I'm working here. If you put me to work, I need some money for this. So how do we have that conversation when it comes to interning?
Well, and to your point, there is legislation in favor of that. So it has become an easier conversation to have, but you have to ask. This goes back to asking, right? Is this a compensated position? It's better to find out in the beginning of your interview process than if it's not stated. And oftentimes in the job description, it will say there's a stipend, there's some sort of compensation. But if it doesn't, and you're in the screening call and you are not in a position to work in an uncompensated way, then you have to ask the question, because will put unnecessary pressure on you as a student and as a young person. And you really want to be able to show up fully in this experience. But I think that this is one of the things, we don't like to talk about money, but the reality is that we work because we like the work we do, but we're also compensated for our value.
Right.
And there's absolutely no reason that that should not hold true for interns. So just first and foremost, get it out there. If it's not clear, get an understanding. And if the answer is this is not a compensated internship and it is the internship of your dreams, have the conversation about flexibility from the employer end. I am not in a position to take an uncompensated internship. Would you be willing to do a 3-day-a-week internship so I can then take a job for the other 2 days a week to try to offset this? Because this is where I want to be. And so be creative, problem solve, figure it out. If you want to be there, ask the question. You have to understand, you're not taking the money out of the HR people's pocket. It's company. It comes from the company, right? This is not a personal donation. And so if there is a way for the organization to be flexible, then you can ask them about that. And if there isn't, then what you do is you keep the door open, because there will be a time that you'll be looking for a full-time role, and keep that person in your network. Connect with them on LinkedIn. Make sure that they know where you landed when you weren't able to take that internship. Keep them in your journey's loop so you can go back to them later on.
That's a great sort of, I guess, a way to address the compensation part when it comes to really the money being the focus, if you can't do this work without compensation. But as a final thought on that, I would love to get your opinion on this. So for example, with my internship at the time, I had gone to college as a non-traditional student. Later in life, landed at MTV, which was like a joke almost, funny. I had grown up on MTV, but now I was no longer the MTV generation, and I get an internship at MTV, like in my mid-30s. But I was determined to make my internship count still. So I knew that the compensation for me was going to be able to walk out of Viacom, major media conglomerate, with actual work in my portfolio, because that is something that I almost couldn't pay for, really, right? To have that, from a major TV show or whatever the opportunities might be. So sometimes it's okay. I'm trying to balance it out. It's okay. Like, if you can work for no money, if you can evaluate what will that do for your resume as a line item, what will that do for your portfolio, that could be much more than that stipend that you're going to receive. Right.
If
so
you're
it's like
able to do it. Yeah. Right. And this is why you should go into that experience with goals. Paid internship, not paid internship. That's why you need to have a goal. You were talking about coming out with work product, but if you can also come out with skills development, you can also come out with work product in the world of I led this project, or I completed this project, or I did this presentation, or that's work product. And so you've got to balance out what you want to get out of it, and don't let it just sweep you along, because everything is about building iterative skills.
Absolutely wonderful conversation. I'm so excited for our audience and everyone listening, because everyone knows someone who's going to be going to college or has a kid going to college, or there's a whole bunch of scenarios in which this information in your new book, Marti, is going to help so many people. And again, thank you for writing it. And I just want to say thanks for being here today. Marti Fischer, career coach, educator, and author of the brand new book, Make Your Internship Count, Find, Launch, and Embrace Your Career. Thanks for being a guest today on Motivational Mondays.
Thank you. Great conversation.